Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another review here for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2, and this one here is on Episode 5. So obviously this will contain spoilers for the episode, so I hope you're all aware of that. This episode I thought was actually it was a really great episode. Honestly, I had no expectations at all going into the episode because of how crazy Episode 4 was, and so I was wondering where was the story going to go next, and you could sort of see, I think, how the season is overall going to end, just based off of this episode and also sort of the trailer, I guess, for Episode 6. So yeah, I do want to talk about all that. So before we go any further, make sure you be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. I will be posting my trailer breakdown right after this, as well as a couple of videos later on tonight on Episode 5, so stay tuned for all of that. But this episode starts off with Daryl and Carol. They're trying to start the car, and Daryl's thinking of Isabel and whatnot, and is sort of just in this mindset of, I can't believe she's gone kind of thing. And Carol even asks him, like, if he wants to talk about it, and then he's just like, no, he doesn't want to. And honestly, that happens a lot in this episode, and I think that's just sort of their way of dealing with everything. Like, they don't got to talk about anything. Like, you know, talking about it's not really going to fix anything. And I think that they're just very strong to the point where they just want to deal with their issues on their own. And I think that we've seen that a lot from Carol. You know, she doesn't really want to talk about stuff. We've seen that from Daryl as well in this episode. And so it was kind of interesting, you know, just to see how they sort of deal with some of these issues overall. But yeah, and then we see Kudrone show up. He actually goes to see Falou, and then he tells them about Carol. And the weird thing I will say is that in the scene here, and actually I do like how everything played out overall. Like, at first I was writing my notes here and I was like, it's weird that Carol won't even tell Daryl right away that she lied about Sophia. Like, maybe she just feels really bad about it. But I just feel like in a situation like that, if you're walking up to, I guess, where Ash would be, you would be like, all right, so I lied about this and that. And so, you know what I mean? Otherwise, Daryl's going to be shocked and be like, wait, what? What's going on? So unless Carol knew she was going to have to tell Ash, like, I thought that maybe she would have a different approach to it. And so I thought that this scene was a little off. But as soon as they started to actually, like, go towards the, I guess, the garage or whatever, and then Carol's like, okay, well, let me be in front at least. So she starts to run ahead. Then I was like, okay, I like the scene overall. But yeah, they discover that Ash went missing. And so we obviously saw that he got trapped in a car, but they had to find out where he was. And so I thought that that was kind of, you know, looking back at it now, it's smart that they showed us that Ash was trapped in the vehicle, because I think that if they never showed us that scene and then we just sort of found him randomly in a vehicle later on in the episode, it would be a disappointing reveal, I think, because they're out there looking for him. They go to, you know, to see Anne, they go to see Falou, and a lot of people, like, they're out everywhere looking for Ash. And so I really do think that if we never knew where he was already, like, we, the audience, we already knew where he was, if we didn't know that, I would be waiting for some big reveal of some sort. And so I think it was smart to show us that, because it kept our expectations low, and it was honestly just a really nice episode to watch overall. Daryl and Carol, though, are reunited with Laurent, and so that was really cool. Well, actually, Carol meets Laurent for the first time, so that was really interesting. Daryl sees Kudrone, and I will say, after this episode, like, if I could name 3 stars of the episode, like, the first star I would say would go to most likely Kudrone, because Kudrone to me is probably, like, one of the best characters, and I don't know where the story is going here for the finale, but I hope we do see him again, right? Like, they are going to Spain for season 3, and I think it makes sense as to how, just based off of the ending here. We'll talk about that. And so because Spain and France are so close together, I think it makes sense that eventually Kudrone could still be a part of the story, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. I'm not sure where all these characters' stories are going here. Like, maybe he dies in the finale, so that's the end of all that. We'll have to wait and see. But I think that if he were to show up in season 3, that would be absolutely incredible. And I really do think I know how they're going to Spain here and stuff. And yeah, we'll talk about that obviously in my trailer breakdown. But everyone learns that Janae is dead. Carol tells everybody, and then Daryl talks to Laurent alone, tells him that Isabel's gone. And so he told him off screen. That was a moment that I definitely wasn't a fan of, because it was a missed opportunity, I think, to go more in depth with a moment like that. And, like, I guess that's also something as well, you know, do we need to see a moment like that? Do we need to see Laurent's reaction to a moment like that? I don't think we necessarily need to. I think the moment overall was great, but I think that this moment could have been better overall. And again, it's because it's 6 episodes, you're condensing this big story into just a short amount of time, and so a lot of moments like that just need to happen off screen, because you need to get to this point, you need to get to this point really fast in order for the pacing to actually kind of work, right? Like, if you notice with the 6 episodes, even though it does feel very rushed, the pacing is still very well done. Like, it does feel like it's manageable. Like, it's a very, like, consistently quick pacing, I would say, over the season. Like, everything is happening so fast, but the whole season is going that way, so you don't really notice too much. It's just compared to most TV shows out there in general, because a lot of TV shows are 8 to 10 episodes episodes, right? So it does feel quicker. And so we learn that Laurent wants to go to school. He wants to see a movie. Daryl says, you know, I'll teach you how to ride a bike and whatnot, like back at the Commonwealth. And Laurent says that he wants Daryl to go back and says that he'll just stay here. He can have peace here, and so Daryl should too, and so he should go back to America. And this was a whole aspect to the episode that I wasn't expecting. Kind of felt a little unneeded, I will say. Like, it was kind of random. I think if you just took this element to it out, then I think the episode overall, you know, would have played out exactly the same. Like, Laurent saying that he wants to stay didn't really add anything to the episode. It was just sort of something else that was there. But I think that, I mean, obviously Laurent might feel like that, but it was just something that was sort of randomly introduced overall. And when you think of what happened throughout the entire episode, like, there was just so much that happened. It didn't really make too much sense because in the end, Laurent wanted to go anyways. And the whole reveal of it was that Laurent just didn't want Daryl to die. And like, I understand aspects to it like that, I guess. And I guess you do want to create some more emotional bonding between Laurent and Daryl. So I do understand it, I guess, from that aspect. But in the end, it was fine anyways, because Laurent, you know, he wants to go back to America because there's really nothing here for him. The scene of Carol looking around at how the whole place operates, that was kind of cool. It really felt like a video game, just in terms of like, okay, you're in this new place and you're looking around and you're like, wow, this is how this place operates. And like the music in the scene as well, I was just like, okay, this really feels like, I don't even know what video game to be honest, but it just kind of felt like that. But yeah, she sees Sophia for a second because somebody there was wearing clothes that looked exactly like Sophia's clothes, so kind of random. But she talks with Daryl, and again, you get one of those scenes where, yeah, Daryl feels bad about Laurent not going. And that's the thing too, is I feel like he could have been upset about Isabel, and I think that would have been fine. This whole Laurent not going storyline, I think, was just kind of added to the episode just to, I mean, I don't even really know what. It added some elements to certain things in terms of focusing more on Daryl and Laurent and that relationship and what that could actually be like, right? Like, we saw a lot of Daryl and Laurent almost arguing about certain things, and I understand, I guess, some aspects to it because you are creating, again, this bond between the characters and you're seeing how they would operate, I guess, without Isabel there, right? And I understand it from that perspective, but I think you probably could have done a lot more, where maybe it was just more of a conversation that happened in the scene instead of it being like a whole storyline that happened throughout the whole episode. But we do see Daryl and Carol go to the nightclub where Anne is, and yeah, they go and talk to her, and honestly, it's really hilarious to see the whole change in tone, just because, like, entering the scene, seeing Carol's reaction, Daryl laughing about everything too as well. Well, he wasn't laughing, but, you know, he was sort of amused by Carol's reaction to everything because it was just so ridiculous, right? But, yeah, so Anne doesn't really have a lot of information anyways, but they do see the gasoline that was taken from Ash's plane, and so right away they're like, okay, so you must know where Ash is, or where did you find that? And so from that, they kind of find out where Ash is overall. And then, yeah, we see Caudron talking with Laurent. I thought it was a really nice scene overall, just to sort of honestly make Caudron not the villain anymore. I thought that was a great scene, I guess, for that purpose, really. But Losang shows up and obviously causes a lot of problems here. He sees the Rubik's Cube that Laurent had, and so he knows that he's there. And that's the thing, in terms of moments being convenient like that is something that makes a lot of sense, because for the story, Laurent was just there, and obviously he was playing with like the Rubik's Cube, right? And so as soon as Losang showed up, he left, and so he would have left that there, right? Especially if he put it down for a second to talk with Caudron. So that makes a lot of sense. The really cool thing about this episode actually is that we see Carol finding the tape of Daryl saying that he wants Rick to know that he tried. That was a really cool moment because that happened in the very first episode, obviously, of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon. And so to actually see that, I mean, it's insane because that was the first time we ever learned of Pouvoir and Madame Genet, and when she first got that tape of Daryl saying that, like, just overall, it's insane to see how this arc has played out, because now they're in Madame Genet's base here, and the whole place is completely deserted. You know, anything that they were working on in terms of like super walkers or just anything is all gone. Like, nobody's here anymore, and it's just crazy to see how much has changed, like, really this fast, which I don't have an issue with the arc ending within 2 seasons. I think that's fine. It's just how quick everything happened in terms of it, again, being only 6 episodes, right? Losang goes into a speech here about the apocalypse and how hard it is and all of that, which I thought was kind of cool. And Daryl and Carol have this crazy action scene where they're taking out a bunch of walkers, and then eventually they actually end up trapped in the vehicle, and they intentionally go in there because obviously, well, that was sort of the thing about it that I found kind of confusing. Like, as soon as they went in the vehicle, like, obviously they wanted to go in the vehicle to find Ash, right? Because they wanted to know if he was in there. Well, that's what was confusing about the scene, is that I think that they probably could have taken out all of the walkers. Like, they were taking out a bunch of them already, like, as they were going there. it felt like they probably could have taken out a lot of them already, or they should have had a better plan going there, because they see all the walkers, so obviously that they're assuming that, okay, we can take all of them out. Like, is their plan really to go and like clear a bunch of walkers and then just make it to the vehicle to get inside, and then we'll plan from there? Because that's honestly kind of a ridiculous plan, because then you're going to be trapped, right? So I think that they should have taken out all the walkers instead of just trapping themselves in the vehicle. So I thought that that was kind of silly, but we did actually get a really amazing scene out of it, which is Daryl creating the super walkers, which was always, I think, the intent of the scene. I think that they were like, you know what, we want Daryl to create super walkers and have this really cool scene play out, so we have to somehow get Daryl trapped in the vehicle. There was honestly probably a way better way to do that. I think that Ash could have been there with some walkers and that would have been fine. And so they just walk up to the vehicle, take out a couple of walkers, and then they see Ash in there. And then maybe as they're trying to help him out, a bunch of walkers show up right away. And so now they're trapped, right? Instead of them taking out a bunch of them, stopping because I don't know why, and then trapping themselves in the vehicle. It's kind of, yeah, I don't know why it played out like that, but still, creating the super walker was really cool. Honestly, the music in this scene as the camera was like spinning around really felt like Dragon Ball Z music. Like if you've watched Dragon Ball Z, also kind of felt like Resident Evil a little bit. It just felt like a classic video game scene in some sense. But yeah, the super walkers, honestly, really incredible. I feel like it's probably the last time we're going to see these super walkers. I think that going forward, we're just going to see different variants now. But, you know, seeing what the super walkers can do overall, like even though Daryl was fighting the super walker in that scene, to me, that's okay. It's the fact that he's struggling with just one super walker there. Like he literally can't even take out this one super walker. Like eventually he does, but that's what I mean. Like if you had 3 or 4 super walkers after you, you're done. So like Daryl can maybe take out one, like maybe the group can sort of take out one at a time, but like if there's a bunch of them running at them, there's no way it's possible, right? So yeah, I just thought that, you know, in terms of seeing the super walkers, this might be the end of it, but we'll have to wait and see. It was still really cool to see though overall. But yeah, they do save Ash though, and then they go to the plane. Daryl tells Carol that she should really just tell him the truth, and Daryl figured out right away what Carol was lying about, and so Carol stays behind and just tries to help out Ash, you know, and get the plane ready. Daryl finds Cadron and Laurent, and yeah, the plan is to take Laurent now back to America, basically. I think Daryl's just sort of assuming that, yeah, you know what, Losang's out here, all the stuff is happening out here, like it's still too dangerous, we need to take Laurent back to America. I like the fact that Daryl went there to get, you know, gasoline again, because obviously he was just there and got some, so he's like, well, I'm gonna go back and get some more, right? Like I think that made a lot of sense. And then he just ran into Cadron and Laurent because they left Falou's place because Losang was there. And so this is sort of what I mean though in terms of the pacing. Like with all these characters showing up in these places constantly within the episode, like a lot happens in an episode, but it's a little too fast, right? Like it's certain things happening so quick. It's like you see the scene playing out, also the next scene they're at the nightclub, and then the next scene they're at Falou's place, and then the next scene they're back at the garage or whatever where the plane is. It's just like, it's a lot. The characters are traveling quite a bit, and there's a lot of time that I'm sure is passing by here that we're just not seeing. And so definitely, you know, in terms of when I give my reviews of the episodes, I do have to sort of always say that that's an issue, because I will always say that until they fix that, because it is an issue. I'm not going to ignore that. But Carol does try to tell Ash, but then Ash is just like, yeah, you know what, this trip really helped me with my guilt overall. And so Carol's like, oh, I can't tell him now. But she actually does eventually tell him. And so I really liked his reaction. I think that overall his reaction to Carol's lie was very, very honest, and I like where things are at overall. And I think this is what makes me really like Ash just as a character in general, is because at the very end, obviously when Daryl and Laurent are there, and then Ash is like, well, the plane's not gonna be able to take all 4 of them. That's something that I like, the fact that he's not taking out his frustrations on Carol, and it's just like, you know what, I'm gonna leave you here, I'm just gonna go in the plane and leave, right? Like he's not acting like that about it. He's just, you know, he's being very, I guess, respectful still, and he's just like, yeah, I'll take you back home. But I'm assuming at that point, like, that's going to be the end of it, right? Like the anger in the scene as well, that was really great. Like it was a really honest reaction, and I think that Ash probably should have been in this season a lot more. Also, Carol working on the plane I thought was kind of ridiculous, but I think she was just looking at the plane and just like trying to clean it up and stuff like that. I don't think she was actually like working on it, trying to fix it, because that would be like way too much. Like you were literally never around the plane, you never saw Ash really work on the plane. How would you know how all of this stuff works, right? So I'm happy that it didn't really seem like that. that, because that would just be, again, really ridiculous that Carol just learned all that stuff that fast. But just before this, we do see Losang show up to the nightclub, and it ends up in a really interesting battle that happens, I guess, in like these tunnels or whatever. And so Kudrone takes out everyone basically, which is really cool. Honestly, Kudrone, again, really amazing character. I hope he's in season 3. Losang versus Daryl, Kudrone versus Jacinta, I believe her name is. I can't believe that Losang actually died here in this scene. And so, I mean, I will say overall, in terms of the way the scene played out, like, I was okay with it because Losang wasn't really that big of a character this season. Like, Janae had a really cool death and a really cool build up to that moment. But Losang, like, he was a bigger character this season. But I knew he wasn't going to be, like, the next major villain. Like, yes, after Madame Janae's death, like, you're gonna, you know, obviously have to have another villain or something like that. I think that, you know, the way Losang died in this scene here, you know, as much as it was not the coolest fight scene overall, I think Kudrone's was definitely a lot better. But I think it was just deserving of what the story was overall. I don't really have any issues with it because it made sense. And so I think Jacinta actually, it seemed like she was alive. And so she's probably gonna, you know, try to, I guess, get Laurent, because it seems like everyone now, I mean, they're at the plane now, right? We saw that at the very end of the episode. They're all at the plane right now, and based off of the trailer, it looks like they're all about to leave. Kudrone's probably gonna find them at some point, and so somehow in this episode, I'm not sure what's gonna happen here, but Ash and Laurent seem to be, like, actually in the plane going to America, and so because the plane's actually going, and Daryl and Carol are staying behind, and that's the thing, because we know that we're going to season 3, and that we're going to Spain, it kind of makes sense how all this is going to play out here, and I'm really interested in terms of where season 3 is going to go and how this is going to connect to, like, Rick Grimes and sort of the bigger story here. And I wonder if this is what Gimple was talking about in terms of a reference to the future and all that, because if Laurent and Ash go back to America and they go back to the Commonwealth, they can tell everyone there. They're going to get there when Rick and Michonne are there, and they're going to tell all of them that Daryl and Carol are stuck in France and they need a way home. And so that's how the CRM could get involved in The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, and how Rick and Michonne would find out that they're trapped out there, right? So some really interesting connections, but obviously that's assuming that Ash and Laurent actually make it out, but I think they will, because I think if this season ended with Laurent and Ash dying, like, we literally see them in the plane, like, starting to, you know, drive or whatever. So I think that if they were to die at some point after that, that would just be kind of insane based off of how much has happened this season so far. So I think that it makes a lot of sense that at this point here, the story is really going to be like Laurent and Ash are going to go to America. I guess they're going to go back. That's going to be set up for a season 3 or 4 or just whatever with Rick and Michonne and all of that. But we're going to see Daryl and Carol try to, I guess, find another way to get back to America, because obviously, like, it can't fit 4 people, the vehicle, but I'm assuming that it can fit 3, because if it didn't, then the whole story is messed up. Like, the whole story doesn't make sense at all, because they came here to get Sophia, and so if Sophia was there and then Ash is like, yeah, we can't go back because there's 3 people, like, that'd be so ridiculous. And so I think that Daryl's probably going to be like, yeah, no, all 3 of you guys can go back, I'll find my way back. And then Carol's going to be like, I mean, we heard her in the trailer, she was just like, well, no, I'm going to stay behind, kind of thing, right? But we'll talk about this more in my episode 6 trailer breakdown. I'll get into everything more in depth in terms of what I see happening in the finale here. But again, in terms of episode 5 and how all of it played out, I thought that it was a decent episode. I really liked a lot of the Kudrone scenes. Again, I think he would be like the #1 star of the episode for sure. I really like how this arc is playing out right now, just like post, I guess, the Pouvoir story, because it's not making the Nest like the villains right away. Like, they are kind of the villains, but it's just an overall story that is happening. And I like that, because I think that if there was new villains or a new arc that took place afterwards and we only have 2 episodes left, it would just be way too much. And so you're just sort of finishing, I guess, some of these stories here from before with the Nest and whatnot. Pouvoir really is just gone now. I think at this point that group is entirely gone, and that group really only existed because of Janae. Like, as soon as she was gone, the whole thing fell apart. So yeah, I thought it was a decent episode, but post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.